Hello, welcome back to Bible Reading with Study Guide. We finished 1 Samuel, so now we're going into 2 Samuel. And that's going to be a little bit different because 2 Samuel and 1 Chronicles cover the same time period, and so there'll be a lot of overlapping. This lesson can combine 2 Samuel with 1 Chronicles as those accounts overlap. For 7 years, not everyone supported David, the new king. This godly king was not perfect. He sinned and tried to hide it by committing another sin. When confronted by the prophet Nathan, King David admitted his guilt and prayed for God's forgiveness. His life was characterized by humility. Okay, a note here. The first 9 chapters of 1 Chronicles are just genealogies of the 12 tribes of Israel, starting with Adam and ending with the reign of David. It's all names. So I will not be reading those first 9 chapters of 1 Chronicles. I think you can understand why. So let's start with 2 Samuel chapter 1 and also read 1 Chronicles 10 as they overlap. All right, 2 Samuel 1. Now it came to pass after the death of Saul, when David had returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites, and David had stayed 2 days in Ziklag. On the 3rd day, behold, it happened that a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dust on his head. So it was when he came to David that he fell to the ground and prostrated himself. And David said to him, "Where have you come from?" So he said to him, "I have escaped from the camp of Israel." Then David said to him, "How did the matter go? Please tell me." And he answered, "The people have fled from the battle. Many of the people are fallen and dead. And Saul and Jonathan his son are dead also." So David said to the young man who told him, "How do you know that Saul and Jonathan his son are dead?" The young man who told him said, "As I happened by chance to be on Mount Gilboa, there was Saul leaning on his spear. Indeed, the chariot and the horsemen followed hard after him. Now when he looked behind him, he saw me, and he called to me. And I answered, 'Here I am.' And he said to me, 'Who are you?' So I answered him, 'I am an Amalekite.' He said to me again, 'Please stand over me and kill me, for anguish has come upon me, but my life still remains in me.' So I stood over him and killed him, because I was sure that he could not live after he had fallen. And I took the crown that was on his head and the bracelet that was on his arm, and have brought them here to my Lord." Therefore David took hold of his own clothes and tore them, and so did all the men who were with him. And they mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul, and for Jonathan his son, for the people of the Lord, and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. Then David said to the young man who told him, "Where are you from?" And he answered, "I am the son of an alien, an Amalekite." So David said to him, "How was it that you were not afraid to put forth your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" Then David called one of the young men and said, "Go near and execute him." And he struck him so that he died. So David said to him, "Your blood is on your own head, for your own mouth has testified against you, saying, 'I have killed the Lord's anointed.'" But that's not how it happened, is it? Why did he tell that story? Saul fell on his own sword. Then David lamented with his lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan his son, and he told them to teach the children of Judah the song of the bow. Indeed, it is written in the book of Jasher. "The beauty of Israel is slain on your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph. O mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew, nor rain upon you, nor fields of offerings, for the shield of the mighty is cast away there, the shield of Saul not anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, The bow of Jonathan did not turn back, and the sword of Saul did not return empty. Saul and Jonathan were beloved and pleasant in their lives, and in their death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you in scarlet with luxury, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan was slain in your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. You have been very pleasant to me. Your love to me was wonderful, surpassing the love of women. How the mighty have fallen, and the weapons of war perished. Now we'll go over a few pages to past the King's books to 1 Chronicles 10. Now the Philistines fought against Israel. This is 1 Chronicles chapter 10. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from the Philistines and fell on Mount Gilboa. Then the Philistines followed hard after Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua, Saul's sons. The battle became fierce against Saul. The archers hit him, and he was wounded by the archers. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust me through with it, lest these uncircumcised men come and abuse me." But his armor-bearer would not, for he was greatly afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell on it. And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his sword and died. So Saul and his 3 sons died, and all the house died together. And when all the men of Israel who were in the valley saw that they had fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook their cities and fled. Then the Philistines came and dwelt in them. So it happened the next day, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. And they stripped him and took his head and his armor, and sent word throughout the land of the Philistines to proclaim the news in the temple of their idols and among the people. Then they put his armor in the temple of their gods, and fastened his head in the temple of Dagon. And when all Jabesh Gilead heard all that the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons, and they brought him to Jabesh, and buried their bones under the tamarisk tree at Jabesh, and fasted 7 days. So Saul died for his unfaithfulness which he had committed against the Lord, because he did not keep the word of the Lord, and also because he consulted a medium for guidance. But he did not inquire of the Lord. Therefore he killed him, and turned the kingdom over to David, the son of Jesse. We'll see if there's any questions. I don't think the first chapter. I'll start with 2. Okay, now we read all the way in 2 Samuel until 5. Okay. Second Samuel chapter 2. You might also consult or read Psalms 18 during this time. It happened after this that David inquired of the Lord, saying, "Shall I go up to any of the cities of Judah?" And the Lord said to him, "Go up." David said, "Where shall I go up?" And he said, "To Hebron." So David went up there, and his 2 wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. And David brought up the men who were with him, every man with his household. So they dwelt in the cities of Hebron. Then the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. And they told David, saying, "The men of Jabesh Gilead were the ones who buried Saul." So David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, "You are blessed of the Lord, for you have shown his kindness to your Lord, to Saul, and have buried him. And now may the Lord show kindness and truth to you. I also will repay you with this kindness, because you have done this thing. Now therefore, let your hands be strengthened and be valiant, for your master Saul is dead, and also the house of Judah has anointed me king over them." But Abner, the son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, took Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over Mahanaim, Mahanaim, and made him king over Gilead, over the Asherites, over Jezreel, over Ephraim, over Benjamin, and over all Israel. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign in Israel, and he reigned 2 years. Only the house of Judah followed David, and the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. Now Abner the son of Ner and the servants of Ishbosheth the son of Saul went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon, and Joab the son of Zeruiah and the servants of David went out and met them by the pool of Gibeon. So they sat down, one on one side of the pool and the other on the other side of the pool. Then Abner said to Joab, "Let the young men now arise and compete before us." And Joab said, "Let them arise." So they rose and went over by number, 12 from Benjamin, followers of Ishbosheth, the sons of Saul, and 12 from the servants of David. And each one grasped his opponent by the head and thrust his sword in his opponent's side. So they fell down together. Therefore that place was called the Field of Sharp Swords, which is in Gibeon. So there was a very fierce battle that day, and Abner and the men of Israel were beaten before the servants of David. Now the 3 sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. And Asahel was as fleet of foot as a wild gazelle. So Asahel pursued Abner, and in going he did not turn to the right hand or to the left from following Abner. Then Abner looked behind him and said, "Are you Asahel?" And he answered, "I am." And Abner said to him, "Turn aside to your right hand or to your left, and lay hold on one of the young men, and take his armor for yourself." But Asahel would not turn aside from following him. So Abner said again to Asahel, "Turn aside from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then could I face your brother Joab?" However, he refused to turn aside. Therefore Abner struck him in the stomach with the blunt end of the spear, so that the spear came out of his back, and he fell down there and died on the spot. So it was that as many as came to the place where Asahel fell and died stood still. Joab and Abishai also pursued Abner, and the sun was going down when they came to the hill of Ammah, which is before Giah, by the road to the wilderness of Gibeon. Now the children of Benjamin gathered together behind Abner and became a unit and took their stand on top of a hill. Then Abner called to Joab and said, "Shall the sword devour forever? Do you not know that it will be bitter in the latter end? How long will it be until you tell the people to return from pursuing their brethren?" And Joab said, "As God lives, unless you had spoken, surely then by morning all the people would have given up pursuing their brethren." So Joab blew a trumpet, and all the people stood still and did not pursue Israel any more, nor did they fight any more. Then Abner and his men went on all that night through the plain, crossed over the Jordan, and went through all Bithron, and they came to Mahanaim. So Joab returned from pursuing Abner, and when he gathered all the people together, there were missing of David's servants 19 men and Asahel. But the servants of David had struck down of Benjamin and Abner's men 360 men who died. Then they took up Asahel and buried him in his father's tomb, which was in Bethlehem. And Joab and his men went all night, and they came to Hebron at daybreak. Right. So David's becoming king is not the transaction, shall we say, from one government to the other government is not going smooth at all. How long did David reign over just Judah while in Hebron? It tells us in 2:1 through 3. And then in verse 11 exactly, it was over 7 and a half years. Who was crowned king of Israel? The commander of Saul's army got Ishbosheth, didn't he? And crowned him king over Israel. So now the country is kind of split, Israel and Judah. We'll see how long that goes. Now there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. But David grew stronger and stronger, and the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His first was Amnon by Hinnom, the Jezreelitess. The second, Chileab by Abigail, the widow of Nabal, the Carmelite. The third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, the king of Geshur. The fourth, Adonijah, the son of Haggith. The fifth, Shephatiah, the son of Abital. And the sixth, Ithream, by David's wife, Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron. Now it was so, while there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, that Abner was strengthening his hold on the house of Saul. And Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. So Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why have you gone into my father's concubine?" Then Abner became very angry at the words of Ishbosheth and said, "Am I a dog's head that belongs to Judah? Today I show loyalty to the house of Saul, your father, to his brothers and to his friends, and I have not delivered you into the hand of David. And you charge me today with a fault concerning this woman. May God do so to Abner, and more also, if I do not do for David, as the Lord has sworn to him, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan to Beersheba." And he could not answer Abner another word, because he feared him. Then Abner sent messengers on his behalf to David, saying, "Whose is the land?" saying also, "Make your covenant with me, and indeed my hand shall be with you to bring Israel to you." And David said, "Good, I will make a covenant with you, but one thing I require of you. You shall not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see my face." So David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, "Give me my wife, Michal, whom I betrothed to myself for 100 foreskins of the Philistines." And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, from Paltiel, the son of Laish. Then her husband went along with her to Bahurim, weeping behind her. So Abner said to him, "Go return." And he returned. Now Abner had communicated with the elders of Israel, saying, "In time past you were seeking for David to be king over you. Now then, do it. For the Lord has spoken of David, saying, by the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and the hand of all their enemies." And Abner also spoke in the hearing of Benjamin. Then Abner also went to speak in the hearing of David in Hebron, all that seemed good to Israel, and the whole house of Benjamin. So Abner and 20 men with him came to David at Hebron, and David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. Then Abner said to David, "I will arise and go, and gather all Israel to my lord the king, that they may make a covenant with you, that you may reign over all that your heart desires." So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. At that moment the servants of David and Joab came from a raid, and brought much spoil with them. But Abner was not with David in Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. When Joab and all the troops that were with him had come, they told Joab, saying, "Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he sent him away, and he's gone in peace." Then Joab came to the king and said, "What have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why is it that you sent him away, and he has already gone? Surely you realize that Abner the son of Ner came to deceive you, to know you're going out and you're coming in, and to know all that you were doing." And when Joab had gone from David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner, who brought him back from the well of Sirah. But David did not know it. Now when Abner had returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gate to speak with him privately, and there stabbed him in the stomach, so that he died for the blood of Asahel, his brother. Afterward, when David heard it, he said, "My kingdom and I are guiltless before the Lord forever of the blood of Abner, the son of Ner. Let it rest on the head of Joab and all his father's house, and let there never fail to be in the house of Joab one who has a discharge or is a leper, who leans on a staff or falls by the sword, or who lacks bread." So Joab and Abishai, his brother, killed Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel at Gibeon in battle. Then David said to Joab and to all the people who were with him, "Tear your clothes, gird yourselves with sackcloth, and mourn for Abner." And King David followed the coffin. So they buried Abner in Hebron, and the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. And the king gave a lament over Abner and said, "Should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands were not bound, your feet put into fetters, as a man falls before wicked men, so you fell." Then all the people wept over him. And when all the people came to persuade David to eat food while it was still day, David took an oath, saying, "God do so to me and more also, if I taste bread or anything else till the sun goes down." Now all the people took note of it, and it pleased them, since whatever the king did pleased all the people. For all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's intent to kill Abner, the son of Ner. Then the king said to his servants, "Do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? And I am weak today, though anointed king. And these men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too harsh for me. The Lord will repay the evildoer according to his wickedness." Second Samuel chapter 4. When Saul's son, that would be Ishbosheth, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost heart, and all Israel was troubled. Now Saul's son had 2 men who were captains of troops. The name of one was Baanah, and the other name was Rechab. The sons of Rimmon, the Beerothites, of the children of Benjamin. For Beeroth also was part of Benjamin, because the Beerothites fled to Gittaim and have been sojourners there until this day. Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son who was lame in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, and his nurse took him up and fled. And it happened, as she made haste to flee, that he fell and became lame. His name was Mephibosheth. Then the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite and Rechab the Baanah set out and came at about the heat of the day to the house of Ishbosheth, who was lying on his bed at noon. And they came there all the way into the house, as though to get wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and Baanah his brother escaped, for when they came into the house he was lying on his bed in his bedroom. Then they struck him and killed him, beheaded him and took his head, and were all night escaping through the plain. And they brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron, and said to the king, "Here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy who sought your life. And the Lord has avenged my lord the king this day of Saul and his descendants." Do you think David was pleased? But David answered Rechab and Baanah his brother, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, and said to them, "As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life from all adversity, when someone told me, saying, 'Look, Saul is dead,' thinking to have brought good news, I arrested him and had him executed in Ziklag, the one who thought I would give him a reward for his news. How much more when wicked men have killed a righteous person in his own house on his bed? Therefore, shall I now not require his blood at your hand, and remove you from the earth? So David commanded his young men, and they executed them, cut off their hands and feet, and hanged them by the pool in Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the tomb of Abner in Hebron. David doesn't like people getting revenge for him. He wasn't that kind of a person. Who was Mephibosheth's father? It was Jonathan, wasn't it? Saul's grandson was Mephibosheth. And why was he concerned about it? Well, he was lame. Something had happened, and his nurse had dropped him, and something, I don't know. He had an accident, and he couldn't walk. At least not very well. I'm not sure how lame he was. 2 Samuel chapter 5. Then all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and spoke, saying, Indeed, we are your bone and your flesh. Also in time past, when Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel out and brought them in, and the Lord said to you, You shall shepherd my people Israel, and be ruler over Israel. Therefore, all the elders of Israel came to the king of Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years. So he was a young man when he started reigning in Hebron. He had already reigned 7 years. And he was 30, so he was only like 23, 22 when he became king. So 30 years. Altogether he reigned 40 years. 7 years. He was 30 years old when he began to reign. No, he was 30 when he began to reign. So he was like 37 or so when the country united behind him. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites and the inhabitants of the land, who spoke to David, saying, You shall not come in here, but the blind and the lame will repel you, thinking, David cannot come in here. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, that is, the city of David. So the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites. Okay, this is where Jerusalem becomes important. Now David said on that day, Whoever climbs up by the way of the water shaft and defeats the Jebusites, the lame and the blind, who are hated by David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. Therefore they say, The blind and the lame shall not come into the house. Then David dwelt in the stronghold and called it the city of David. And David built all around from the Millo and inward. So David went on and became great. And the Lord God of hosts was with him. Then Hiram, and that water shaft, I saw that on a video. Sergio and Rhoda in Israel, they showed that I wouldn't want to climb that. It was kind of scary. Anyway, then Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, and cedar trees, and carpenters, and masons, and they built David a house. So David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel, and that he exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. And David took more concubines and wives from Jerusalem after he had come from Hebron. Also more sons and daughters were born to David. Now these are the names of those who were born to him in Jerusalem: Shammua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Nepheg, Japhia, Elishama, Eliada, and Eliphalet. Now when the Philistines heard that they had anointed David king over Israel, all the Philistines went up to search for David. And David heard of it and went down to the stronghold. The Philistines also went and deployed themselves in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hand? And the Lord said to David, Go up, for I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into your hand. So David went to Baal Perazim, and David defeated them there. And he said, The Lord has broken through my enemies before me, like a breakthrough of water. Therefore he called the name of that place Baal Perazim. And they left their images there, and David and his men carried them away. Then the Philistines went up once again, and deployed themselves in the valley of Rephaim. Therefore David inquired of the Lord, and he said, You shall not go up. Circle around behind them, and come upon them in front of the mulberry trees. And it shall be, when you hear the sound of the marching in the tops of the mulberry trees, then you shall advance quickly. For then the Lord will go out before you to strike the camp of the Philistines. And David did so, as the Lord commanded him. And he drove back the Philistines from Geba as far as Gezer. All right, there's a couple questions. So now he set up his place of reigning in Jerusalem. Okay. How old was David when he began to reign? We figured that out. He was 30. That's what it said. How long did he reign in Jerusalem? So he reigned in Jerusalem 33 years. Okay, now we're going back up to 1 Chronicles. We read chapter 10. Now we're going to read 11, 12, and 14. A little bit more information about David from another author. Then all Israel came together to David at Hebron, saying, Indeed, we are your bone and your flesh. Also in time past, when Saul was king, you were the one who led Israel out and brought them in. And the Lord your God said to you, You shall shepherd my people and be Israel, and be ruler over my people Israel. Therefore all the elders of Israel came to the king of Hebron, and David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed king over Israel, according to the word of the Lord by Samuel. And David and all Israel went to Jerusalem, which is Jebus, where the Jebusites were, the inhabitants of the land. But the inhabitants of Jebus said to David, You shall not come in here. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, that is, the city of David. And David said, Whoever attacks the Jebusites first shall be chief and captain. Then Joab, the son of Zeruiah, went up first and became chief. Then David dwelt in the stronghold. Therefore they called it the city of David. And he built the city around it, from the Millo to the surrounding area. Joab repaired the rest of the city. So David went on and became great, and the Lord of hosts was with him. Now these were the heads of the mighty men who David had, who strengthened themselves with him in his kingdom, with all of Israel, to make him king, according to the word of the Lord concerning Israel. This is the number of mighty men whom David had. Jashabim, the son of Hakmonite, chief of the captains, he lifted up his spear against the 300, killed by him at one time. After him was Eleazar, the son of Dodo, the Ahohite, who was one of the 3 mighty men. He was with David at Pasdammim. Now there the Philistines were gathered for battle, and there was a piece of ground full of barley, so the people fled from the Philistines. But they stationed themselves in the middle of that field, defended it, and killed the Philistines. So the Lord brought about a great victory. Now 3 of the 30 chief men went down to the rock to David, to the cave of Adullam, and the army of the Philistines encamped in the valley of Rephaim. David was then in the stronghold, and the garrison of the Philistines was then in Bethlehem. And David was said with longing, Oh, that someone would give me a drink of water from the well of Bethlehem, which is by the gate. So the three broke through the camp of the Philistines, drew water from the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate, and took it and brought it to David. Nevertheless, David would not drink it, but poured it out to the Lord. And he said, Far be it from me, O my God, that I should do this. Shall I drink the blood of these men who have put their lives in jeopardy? For at the risk of their lives they brought it. Therefore he would not drink it. These things were done by the three mighty men. Abishai the brother of Joab was chief of another three. He had lifted up his spear against 300 men, killed them, and won a name among these three. Of the three he was more honored than the other 2 men. Therefore he became their captain. However, he did not attain to the first 3. Benaiah was the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man from Kabzeel, who had done many deeds. He had killed 2 lion-like heroes of Moab. He also had gone down and killed a lion in the midst of a pit on a snowy day. And he killed an Egyptian, a man of great height, 5 cubits tall. 5 cubits tall, 5.5. Like maybe 7.5 feet tall or so. In the Egyptian's hand there was a spear like a weaver's beam, and when we went down to him with the staff, wrestled the spear out of the Egyptian's hand, and killed him with his own spear. These things Benaiah the son of Jehoiada did, and won a name among 3 mighty men. Indeed, he was more honored than 30, but he did not attain to the first 3. And David appointed him over his guard. Also the mighty warriors were Asahel the brother of Joab, Elhanan the son of Dodo of Bethlehem, Shammah the Harorite, Helez the Pelonite, Ira the son of Ikish the Tekoite, Abiezer the Anathite, Sibachai the Hushathite, Eli the Ahithite, Rari the Netophathite, Heled the son of Bana the Nephathite, Ethael the son of Rubai of Gibeah, the sons of Benjamin, Benaiah the Pirathonite, Hurai of the brooks of Gash, Abiel the Arbathite, Asmaveth the Baharumite, Eliab the Shelbanite, the sons of Hashem the Gizonite, Jonathan the son of Shega the Hararite, Jonathan the son of Hararite, Aham the son of Sakar the Hararite, Eliphal the son of Ur, Hefer the Machurathite, Ahijah the Pelonite, Hezro the Carmelite, Nari the son of Ezbai, Joel the brother of Nathan, Mibhar the son of Hagri, Zelek the Ammonite, Naharari the Berothite, the armor-bearer of Joab, the son of Zariah, Ira the Ithrite, Gareb the Ithrite, Uriah the Hittite, Zabad the son of Ali, Adina the son of Shiza the Reubenite, a chief of the Reubenites, and 30 with him, Hanan the son of Maacah, Josaphat the Mithnite, Uzziah the Ashtathite, Shema and Jeiel, the sons of Hothram the Ararite, Jediel the son of Shimri, and Joha his brother, the Tizite, Eliite the Mahavite, Jerubai and Joshaviah, the sons of Elnam, Ithma the Moabite, Eliel, Obad, and Jasiel the Mesobite. Okay, I didn't know I was going to be getting into some more words like that. 1 Chronicles chapter 12. Now these were the men who came to David at Ziklag, while he was still a fugitive from Saul, the son of Kish. And they were among the mighty men, helpers in the war, armed with bows, using both the right hand and the left, and hurling stones and shooting arrows with their bows. They were of Benjamin, Saul's brethren. The chief was Ahiezer, then Joash, the sons of Shema, the Gibeathite, Jeziel, and Pelet, the sons of Asmaveth, Barakah, and Jehu the Anathothite, Ishmaiah the Gibeonite, a mighty man among the 30, and over the 30 Jeremiah, Jahaziel, Johanan, and Jozbad, the Gederathite, Eluziah, Jeremoth, Beliah, Shemariah, and Shephatiah, the Haruphite, Elkanah, Jeshiah, Azrael, Jozer, and Jashabim, the Korites, and Jola, and Zebediah, the sons of Jeroham of Geder. Some Gadites joined David at the stronghold in the wilderness, mighty men of valor, trained for battle, who could handle shield and spear, whose faces were like the faces of lions and were as swift as gazelles on the mountains. Ezer the first, Obadiah the second, Eliab the third, Mishmannah the fourth, Jeremiah the fifth, Attaiah the sixth, Ethiel the seventh, Johanan the eighth, Elzabad the ninth, Jeremiah the 10th, and Machbanai the 11th. These were from the sons of Gad. Captains of the army. The least was over 100, and the greatest over 1,000. These were the ones who crossed the Jordan in the first month, when they had overflowed all its banks, and they put to flight all those in the valleys to the east and to the west. Then some of the sons of Benjamin and Judah came to David at the stronghold, and David went out to meet them and answered and said to them, "If you have come peaceably to me, to help me, my heart will be united with you. But if to betray me to my enemies, since there is no wrong in my hands, may the God of our fathers look and bring judgment." Then the Spirit came upon Amasai, chief of the captains, and he said, "We are yours, O David. We are on your side, O son of Jesse. Peace, peace to you, and peace to your helpers, for your God helps you." So David received them and made them captains of the troop. And some from Manasseh defected to David when he was going with the Philistines to battle against Saul. But they did not help them, for the lords of the Philistines sent them away by agreement, saying, "He may defect to Master Saul and endanger our heads." When he went to Ziklag, those of Manasseh who defected to him were Adnah, Jozabad, Jediel, Michael, Jozabad, Elihu, Zilithai, captains of the thousands who were from Manasseh. And they helped David against the bands of raiders, for they were all mighty men of valor, and they were captains of the army. For at that time they came to David day by day to help him, until it was a great army, like the army of God. Now these were the numbers of the divisions that were equipped for war, and came to David at Hebron, to turn over the kingdom of Saul to him, according to the word of the Lord. Of the sons of Judah, bearing shield spear, 6,800 armed for war. The sons of Simeon, mighty men of valor fit for war, 7,100. Of the sons of Levi, 4,600. Jehoiada, the leader of the Aaronites, and with him 3,700. Zadok, the young man, a valiant warrior, and from his father's house 22 captains. Of the sons of Benjamin, relatives of Saul, 3,000. Until then, the greatest part of them had remained loyal to the house of Saul. Of the sons of Ephraim, 20,800, mighty men of valor, famous men throughout their father's house. Of the half-tribe of Manasseh, 18,000, who were designated by name to come and make David king. Of the sons of Issachar, who had understanding of the times, to know what Israel ought to do, their chief chiefs were 200, and all the brethren were at their command. Of Zebulun, there were 50,000 who went out to battle, expert in war with all weapons of war, stout-hearted men who could keep ranks. Of Naphtali, 1,000 captains, and with them 37,000 with shield and spear. Of the Danites, who could keep battle formation, 28,600. Of Asher, those who could go out to war, able to keep battle formation, 40,000. Of the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh, from the other side of the Jordan, 120,000 armed for battle, with every kind of weapon of war. And all these men of war, who could keep ranks, came to Hebron with a loyal heart to make David king over all Israel. And all the rest of Israel were with one mind to make David king. And they were there with David 3 days, eating and drinking, for the brethren had prepared for them. Moreover, those who were near to them, from as far away as Issachar and Zebulun and Naphtali, were bringing food on donkeys and camels, on mules and oxen, provisions of flour and cakes of figs and cakes of raisins, wine and oil and oxen and sheep abundantly, for there was joy in Israel. So they're all going to be united. Everybody's going to be friends of Israel and Judah. I'm going to skip 13 for now. Read it next time. We'll go to 14. 1 Chronicles chapter 14. Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, and cedar trees with masons and carpenters to build him a house. Remember? We read that in 2 Samuel. So David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel, for his kingdom was highly exalted for the sake of his people Israel. Then David took more wives in Jerusalem, and David begot more sons and daughters. Oh my goodness. These are the names of his children whom he had in Jerusalem: Shammua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Abhar, Elishua, Eliphat, Noga, Nepheg, Japhiah, Elishama, Eliada, and Eliphelet. Oh, these are the ones. I already read those. Okay, these aren't in addition. They're just repeating what we read in 2 Samuel 5. Now when the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, the Philistines went up to search for David. And David heard of it and went down against them. Then the Philistines went and made a raid of the valley of Rephaim. And David inquired of the Lord, shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hand? Remember what the Lord said? The Lord said to him, go up, for I will deliver them into your hand. So they went up to Baal Perazim, and David defeated them there. Then David said, God has broken through my enemies by my hand like a breakthrough of water. Therefore they called the name of that place Baal Perazim. And when they left their gods there, David gave a commandment, and they were burned with fire. I didn't mention that in 2 Samuel, just that they took them. Then the Philistines once again made a raid on the valley. Therefore David inquired again of the Lord. What did God say? And God answered him, you shall not go up after them. Circle around behind them and come upon them in front of the mulberry trees, right? And what are you to listen for? And it shall be when you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the mulberry trees, then you shall go out to battle. For God has gone out before you to strike the camp of the Philistines. So David did as God commanded, and he drove back the army of the Philistines from Gibeon as far as Gezer. Then the fame of David went out into all the lands, and the Lord brought fear of him upon all nations. Okay, this will be interesting going back and forth between books, but we can see how stuff is repeated. And I just don't want to skip, because sometimes things are not repeated, and we'd miss it if we don't. But it's kind of chronological, if you kind of keep the same time frame. So, anyway, I hope this works out okay. See you next time.